Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.
Welcome again to Street Talk. My name is Ahmad Shakaraka, and on Street Talk we deal with political, social, and economics here in Michigan, the U.S., and abroad. Now, joining me tonight,
Dennis Burnside.
Okay, we've got a lot to try to cover tonight, but how about we're seeing some talk about people having to go and sit and tell what their part was in the January the 6th thing.
Yeah, there's been some increasing pressure being walked up on participants. In some of the early cases we saw, people were being charged with trespass and generally rowdy behavior, getting a few weeks or probation in jail. But now we're starting to see some of these charges become more serious and moving up the food chain. For example, the fool that was out there with the horns, etc. He just got sentenced to roughly 4 years, just a little bit south of 4 years in prison.
Okay.
Now that's a real deterrent. That's the kind of charge that we should see. And the reason why I say that is, for the most part, you saw a bunch of low information voters out there with their own implicit biases against political ideologies that they don't agree with. Okay, that's fine. And they're easily swayed to action because, like I said, they're low information. They don't read. They don't know the history.
Right.
They don't know some of the idiosyncrasies of the issues that they're even commenting on. But evidence has started to come out to show that January 6th was more than just a rowdy demonstration that got out of hand and turned into rioters who turned into people who were threatening violence. The violence was the point in the first place. And we're starting to see that from some of the evidence. For example, the room that was ransacked and damaged the most was a parliamentarian room.
Okay.
And that's a room where the electoral ballots are stored typically until such time as the confirmation occurs that night, the Senate confirmation of the election. Well, among those fools were some insurrectionists, some traitors who went there with the objective of overturning a legal election and reinstalling in place Twitler. So when you look at that type of action, you're looking at people who are saying that the Constitution is just an excuse for me to do what I want. What I really want is I say that I stand on the Constitution, I pledge allegiance to the flag and sing the national anthem, is I want a authoritarian government of my choosing, of the kind of person that I prefer. And if I don't have the votes if my side doesn't have the votes to make it happy, we'll pretend like we do, we'll take it, and we'll say it's justified because the other side is cheating. So I think that what you should see as these cases go forward is more and more in-depth investigation information being forwarded at these trials,
Mhm.
and people who had more of a directional
Mhm.
participation
Right.
or directional role in this
Mhm.
in this insurrection be revealed
Mhm.
and sentenced to appropriate sentences.
Mhm. Um, because I know, you know, and million more people know that it wasn't just a day they showed up.
No.
You know, this had been already planned, and I think it had been planned all the way from the time that they see Trump didn't win.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, and it might have been, it probably was planned before that, and we just see if he wins. Then if he don't win,
We got this contingency plan in
yeah,
place. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened. We're starting to see that. You had the lawyer who spoke out with the hat. I forget his name now. He was speaking prior to January 6th about, it's going to be a big day. We're going to make some things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Bannon told people to come and be prepared.
Yep.
This is going to be, I think he used the word crazy
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
off the hook.
Yeah.
Those type of proclamations aren't made just off the top of the head.
Oh, no.
These
no.
people actually had expectations of
Mm-hmm.
mayhem.
Yeah.
And something extremely unusual
Mm-hmm.
than the typical counting of ballots and the confirmation of the votes. They had something extra planned, and then we're starting to see that now.
No, we've seen, we've seen protests down Washington, and this is the first time for me, and I've been to some protesters down in Washington, and I've seen a bunch of protesters, and I read about a lot of protesters down there, but I haven't seen any protests where people breaking in and breaking windows and stuff like that. I mean,
And beating police
Yeah,
officers
yeah.
and causing several of them to be hospitalized. Inducing PTSD in several, to the point where they committed suicide after. We saw something very dramatic and traumatic that day, and it wasn't spontaneous.
right.
It wasn't something that happened on the spur of the moment.
Right.
It was planned. All of this was planned with one objective in mind, and that was to prevent the certification of the election.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, some way, I don't know how they thought this was going to work, reinstall Trump as the president. Because, say, for example, their best laid plans came to fruition,
Okay.
and they somehow got their hands on Mike Pence,
Okay.
and they somehow got their hands on members of the squad, LOC, or they got their hands on Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were they going to do? Well, if you go by their words,
It was gonna kill him.
they was going to kill them.
Yeah.
If you go by their words, everything they did that day are things that they said they were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that they didn't do was get their hands on Mitt Romney as he walked up that hallway,
Yeah.
because he was a target too.
Yeah.
Mike Pence, as he just narrowly escaped
Mhm.
from the Senate room.
Yeah.
LOC,
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi,
Pelosi.
they went specifically to their offices looking for them.
Yeah.
One of the most famous, iconic, or infamous pictures from that day is a fool sitting on the desk with his sitting at the desk with
Yeah.
his feet on
Yeah.
Nancy's desk,
Yeah.
rifling through her papers and properties, taunting her.
Yeah.
These people weren't going to go there and confront them and yell at them.
Right.
They were going to do physical harm.
Mhm.
So I think that knowing that going in, you have to ask what motivated that, and then you look at some of the words and some of the writings that they were availed of, and you can see that this was a attempted coup d'etat.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no other way to put it. It was
Yeah.
an attempted coup d'etat, and I say that on November 22nd, 2021, 57 years after the first coup d'etat we had in this country with the assassination of John F. Kennedy
Yep.
by right-wing
Yeah.
actors.
Yeah.
So there's a pattern to this type of behavior.
Mhm.
And the thing I'm fearing now is we look at some of these trials that are going on, the Rittenhouse trial that just ended last week, and the Arbery trial, which is headed to the jury.
Yeah, in fact, today they're doing more. I think it's today.
Yeah, they did the final arguments
Yeah.
today. The prosecution did it this morning, and the defense did that this afternoon. One of the defense attorneys said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that it was Arbery's fault for running through this neighborhood in his khaki shorts with his dirty feet and long fingernails.
Yeah.
That's his fault.
Yeah.
That's worthy of suspicious. That's worthy of suspicion and someone feeling threatened to the point that they need to kill someone.
Yeah.
That's the thinking. Like, he had black feet. He
Yeah.
had black toenails running
Yeah.
through this clean, pristine
Yeah.
neighborhood. He had to die.
Yeah.
He
yeah.
at least had to be confronted.
Yeah.
So that's the type of thing that we're looking at here.
And they had one of those guys was up there. I think this old man, the guy who worked for 30 years at this, for doing something for government and police and all that stuff. His son was up there trying to tell about their defense, and the man was just lying. We didn't see any. We didn't see any gun on. It's like this man's out jogging, He didn't even have a screwdriver.
They acknowledged he didn't have any weapons. They acknowledged that. They acknowledged that he didn't say anything to him.
Right.
He just kept trying to run away.
Yeah.
They acknowledged that that any confrontation that emanated from this was started by them.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that Arbery was somehow a threat has to be reduced down to that BB thing, big black dude.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was a threat. I was afraid of him.
Yeah.
We've been having problems in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We find out that the homeowner where these cameras are put in was not at all disturbed by people coming through looking at his house.
Right.
We find out that he had no involvement whatsoever in any of this vigilante effort to protect his property.
Right.
That he had no complaints.
No.
He never once called the police or anyone else to say, keep an eye on my property.
No.
In fact, what he did is say, leave those people alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Arbery goes through the neighborhood. He looks at that house several times.
Yeah.
There's houses in my neighborhood that I look at as they're being built.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that people walked through my house when it was being built.
Yeah.
And it's not anything unusual. What he did is typical is neighbors walking up the street noticing that you have a new car to drive with,
Mm-hmm.
or you got a new puppy that you're out walking.
Yeah.
They're curious to ask about it.
Yeah.
And we can't have that. So this young man tries to make the case that because he was once in the Coast Guard
Mm-hmm.
and was trained on how to effect a citizen's arrest or a governmental arrest within the Coast Guard, he was somehow justified based on his prior experience for intervening on Mr. Arbery's jog that day.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they said that they have him cornered like a rat,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't let him get away,
Yeah.
and all these different things is pretty much an indication that we need to have that these guys saw someone with melanated skin, didn't like it, fantasizing about what they're going to do with their guns, and they got the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And just like in Milwaukee, we saw the same thing down in Georgia, where we had them assiduously make sure that the jury was dominated by whites.
Yeah.
You got a county that's 50-60% black, but they only have one on the jury down in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
We saw the same thing in Kenosha. I believe Kenosha is probably 15-20% black.
Mm-hmm.
You have one black person on the jury.
Yeah.
There was an article I read this past weekend that talked about one of the things that Thurgood Marshall said back in the 40s.
Okay.
Was that we need to get rid of the preemptive striking of potential jurors from our process.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have to give a reason to strike 12 people from the jury pool, You can just look at them and say, I don't want him,
Right.
him,
Mhm.
her,
Yeah.
him, her,
Yeah.
and her,
Mhm.
and they all happen to be black.
Right.
We know why that's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened in Milwaukee. The same thing happened in Georgia,
Yeah.
where these preemptive strikes came along. These peremptory strikes came along, and people of color were excluded.
Yeah.
Because the prosecution felt in both cases it would be easier. Or I'm sorry, the defense in the Wisconsin case and the defense in Georgia both felt it would be easier for them to convince white jurors
Yeah.
of their
Oh, yeah.
candidate's innocence
Yeah.
than it would be
Yeah.
for someone who was melanated, and we saw the results in Milwaukee.
Yeah. In Milwaukee, we outside of Milwaukee.
Yeah, Kenosha.
Yeah. Even the judge, you know, and I haven't, I got papers at home just stacked up from the time this guy, when he got off until today. I haven't read any of my papers, man, because I didn't want to read about this no good sucker sitting up there. 6 counts against him. He had 6 counts against him, and they didn't convict him of one of those counts. 6.
And one was he was guilty on its face, illegal possession of a gun.
Yeah.
A 17-year-old kid
Yeah.
has in his possession an AR-15 that was conveyed to him illegally.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he wasn't old enough to have a gun if he had gone through the proper routes, but he got that gun from someone else who bought it, and the transfer of possession was illegal.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have had that gun. We
Yeah.
threw that out,
And-
saying that the prosecution didn't bring it up, so we're just going to throw that out.
And he crossed state line.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, you know, the fact that he crossed state line, I saw this written and I couldn't agree more. Let's say that you had a 17-year-old black young man
Mm-hmm.
drive from Illinois to Missouri
Mm-hmm.
to go to a MAGA rally.
Okay.